do you believe that mandatory proportional representation benefits minorities?
No. In fact, I think one of the great handicaps that blacks and other minorities face across the country is that they are systematically mismatched with universities in the admissions process. That is, if Harvard feels that it must have X% of blacks, and if the pool is such that they can't get X% of blacks at the same level as the rest of the Harvard students, they're going to take those blacks who would have succeeded in some state university and bring them to Harvard, where many of them will fail. Or MIT is a better example, that the average black student at MIT is in the bottom 10% of MIT students in math. But he is in the top 90% of all American students in math, because MIT students are so phenomenal in mathematics. Something like 1/4 of all the black students going to MIT do not graduate. You're talking about a pool of people who score at the 90th percentile in math, whom you are artificially turning into failures by mismatching them with the school. Back in the, much earlier, you had a great increase of blacks in the universities through the GI Bill. You had nothing like that kind of attrition from that process, because the student went wherever he could be accepted, wherever he met the normal standards, and the government simply paid the money.
I gather from your comments about MIT and Harvard that you don't think there's enough blacks out there who are qualified to fill the number of vacancies allotted for them in those schools. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the word qualified really is misleading.
Well,
the question is whether or not they are like the other students at Harvard and MIT.
Well, okay. Well, so there's not...
So they may be perfectly qualified. The same student might go through, God help us, I hope there's nobody here from Illinois, Illinois Institute of Technology and do well. But there's no reason why he should fail at MIT. There's no prestige in flunking out of the Ivy League.
I got it. So, but my point is, you believe there are not enough black women and men out there that are the same as white women and men to be able to go through Harvard and MIT.
If there were, it would mean that the whole history of oppression had done no harm whatever.
Well, so the answer is you don't think there are. I just want to figure out what you're saying.
It's not a question of what I think. It's a factual matter.
So factually, you're saying factually there are not enough.
Factually, this study's already been done by Clickguard at Harvard, and the figures are all there. Anyone can look them up.
Okay, no, I just want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking.
At the University of California at Berkeley, for example, where the entering freshman class has been described as, quote, wonderfully diverse, unquote, because the, quote, class closely reflects the actual ethnic distribution of California high school students. These are your words. More than 70% of black students fail to graduate.
Yes.
Why?
Because they're mismatched with Berkeley. That is, these students, the average black student at Berkeley is above the national average on test scores. It's just that the average white student is further above the national average, and the average Asian student further above than the white students. And so in that atmosphere, these students who have every qualification to succeed are artificially turned into failures. And the only beneficiary of that is the University of California at Berkeley. Because what they've effectively done is rented these bodies for window dressing for a few years. And then when they're through with them, they're put aside. A new bunch of bodies are brought in.
Have you told them that?
Oh, yes.
And what do they say to you?
Oh, different things. I remember one fellow saying, "Oh, Tom, I'm just a little guy. I can't do anything about this," which, you know, wonderful. But the people who really have the influence are not the people I've talked with. Those people know exactly what they're doing. There's another group, I guess, that benefits from this. You have an establishment there, a black studies establishment, who needs students to be in their classrooms, and these students serve those purposes. People who have political movements have people they can mobilize for those movements while those students are there. It's very much like what happens in athletics, that you have students who come in, as long as they can score touchdowns, the coach is happy. The fact that these students don't graduate is not the coach's problem. His problem is how to hold on to his six-figure salary and his job. And the students have to be sacrificed, then they are sacrificed.
Let's take it first from the student standpoint. Of 312 black students entering Berkeley in 1987, all were admitted under affirmative action. You say that 70% of those failed to graduate. What would you tell those students to do under the circumstances, knowing that statistic?
I would tell them what I've told students in general of all races to do, which is to go to schools that match your educational capabilities at the time. Because you need to be matched with a school. You shouldn't try to go to where the glitzy name is or what have you. Now, unfortunately, many of the minority students have such low income that they must go to wherever the money is. And the money is disproportionately at the kinds of schools that they will find very, very difficult to graduate from.
What would you tell the school to do?
To admit students on the basis of their qualifications.
But what happens if they come up and statistically they have nothing close to the population?
Well, they won't have anything at the top level. But we have more than 3,000 colleges and universities in this country. Every human being that's not severely mentally retarded is perfectly qualified to be at one of those institutions. I mean, there are institutions where if you can fill out the application form, you're qualified to do the work. And there are others where if you're not in the top 1 or 2%, your chances of making it are extremely slim. And it's precisely these second places that they want to send black students, that they don't send white students of the same level of ability. And it's not at all surprising that they had to run into the academic problems they do. At MIT, the average black student is at the top 10% nationwide in mathematics, and in the bottom 10% at MIT. And 1/4 of them don't make it. Now, when you realize how few black students at that level, to lose 1/4 of them, you can't afford that. I think there's another larger loss that you have. You have the kid who goes to a top-level school, and he wants to be a chemist or whatever. And now he gets there and he finds he cannot learn chemistry as it's taught at that school. Does not mean he can't learn chemistry. It means that if they have very high-pressure students, they can teach this stuff at a very fast rate, skipping on explanations, skipping over steps in the mathematics, and these students will all pick that up as they go along. He may find that he can't keep up with that. And so in order to survive, he switches into some easy subject, which may be some ethnic studies program or what have you. And so someone who could have gotten a first-rate education at a good college ends up getting a third-rate education at a top college, or ends up flunking out altogether. The net effect of the preferential treatment, which is preferential in intention more so than in results, is that those blacks who are particularly disadvantaged have fallen further behind under these policies, that such policies have typically benefited those blacks who were well off, who became better off. Blacks who have relatively less work experience, lower levels of education, black female-headed families, all these groups have fallen further behind during a decade or more of affirmative action. Black female-headed families have had an absolute decline in real income over this span and have fallen further behind white female-headed families. At the same time, black couples who are both college educated earn higher incomes than white couples who are both college educated. So that this whole program makes it, provides incentives to hire blacks who are safe. Therefore, one will make some effort towards one's quota, but one will not take in people who might not progress enough for their promotions and discharge patterns to satisfy the government. So you make it risky to hire average blacks, and more desirable to hire blacks who have not privileges, but advantages.